So now I would like to introduce our first speaker. Kylie Ching is a University of California, Riverside Chancellor's Postdoctoral Fellow in the Department of Gender and Sexuality Studies. Her research interests are contemporary American art, with a focus on art of the Asian diaspora, photography, and Cold War cultural studies. She recently published an article about refugee memory and photo collages by Anne Lay in the Journal of Asian Diasporic Visual Cultures and the Americas. Kylie is currently working on a book manuscript tentatively titled Diasporic Dialogues, Reconfiguring Photographs, War, and Memory in the Asia Pacific. I would also add that I've known Kylie since she was an undergraduate in our program at UC Irvine and had the pleasure to watch her evolve into an amazing scholar, most recently a year ago with her brilliant dissertation on Asian American women artists and Asian American wars. But unfortunately, Kylie isn't here today. And for all those years knowing Kylie, I never knew that I would have the opportunity to impersonate her. That's exactly what I'm going to do now, and read her paper in absentia for her. I'm deeply sorry that I'm unable to convene with you in person due to an unexpected family situation. Thank you to my fellow panelists and audience members for coming today. If you have any questions about my talk or would like to contact me, please do not hesitate to email me at kyliec@ucr.edu. To begin, I express my gratitude to the Plains and Plateau Nations, who are the indigenous custodians of the land where this conference is held. Land acknowledgements are a vital gesture of support for Native community members, but it is only the first step in forging meaningful relationships. I intend for this talk to contribute to this effort by addressing how the Japanese American incarceration during World War II was entangled with the dispossession of native land. This talk, entitled Tomie Arai, Returns of the Japanese American Incarceration, is situated within the context of Arizona. To commemorate the 50th anniversary of the end of World War II, artist and activist Tomie Arai created a silkscreen print diptych titled Return in 1998. Diptychs are composed of two panels that can be joined together as a single work. Here, Arai reimagines an encounter between Japanese American prisoners and Native Americans across two prints in a mirrored composition. Under the guise of national security, Japanese Americans were forcibly relocated to 10 incarceration camps in desolate parts of the U.S., two of which were built on native reservations in Arizona. The military appropriation of native land stemmed from the advocacy of John Collier, the U.S. Commissioner of Indian Affairs from 1933 to 1945. Collier promoted what he called the Indian New Deal. These policies sought to preserve Native American culture and promoted self-management and economic self-sufficiency. While the War Relocation Authority scrambled to find isolated sites for the camps, Collier saw an opportunity to use wartime resources and Japanese American labor to improve the native land. Collier proposed a list of several reservations from which the War Department selected Gila River Indian Community Reservation, which is the focus of the left panel, and the Colorado Indian River Tribe Reservation on the right panel. Arai situates these communities in relation to each other through two war relocation centers, the Gila River War Relocation Center and the Poston Relocation Center, also known as Colorado River Relocation Center. Arai's return is a very densely layered image. I want to break down some of the elements. Both panels are divided into three mirrored parts. Portraits of tribal members with their tribal seals. Government-sanctioned images from the War Relocation Authority of Japanese Americans framed by barbed wire. Ground plans of the campgrounds. Graphics of different plants. Maps of local interstate highways and words from the exclusion orders. Two kanji, or Japanese characters, for the word return. I take the title return and the inclusion of the word within both panels as a starting point. The invocations of return signal multiple meanings based upon the viewer's positionality. A return for whom? What desires are made visible by a return to the memory and site of the incarceration? Arai's unique position as a post-Cold War artist who reconsiders the relationship between these two communities, two camps, and their intertwined yet distinct relationships to the U.S. militarist carceral state merits a closer study. Moreover, Arai's use of photo collage and silk screen print produces an unusual pictorial strategy to investigate this unusual subject matter. A quick search of American history and art produced during the war and after yields little information about these entangled experiences. I suggest that return serves as a countermap that traces the differential positions of these carceral subjects. Arai's return was commissioned as part of a multi-form and multi-sited project called Transforming Barbed Wire from 1997 to 98. The event was produced by the Arizona Humanities Council with funding from the Rockefeller Foundation and the Civil Liberties Public Education Fund. According to Arai, this was the first opportunity for individuals from the Japanese American and indigenous communities to express their experiences in a shared space. Notably, members of the GRIC invited Arai to tour the reservation and incarceration site. Although Arai's paternal family was imprisoned at the Topaz site in Utah, standing on Gila River prompted her to reconsider her family's immigration trajectory from plantations in Hawaii to agriculture in the Bay Area. And Topaz is implicated within structures of militarist settler colonialism. Now I will turn to a few close readings of Arai's return. I theorize how return functions as a countermap grounded in relationality. The countermap offers new ways of returning and seeing the workings of U.S. empire. Cartography or drawing maps have historically been used for colonial expeditions of domination and conquest. Maps have been used to organize spaces and bodies for the extraction of resources. However, return subverts the function of military maps through its fragmentation and obfuscation. Arai enacts what Nalini Mohabir calls countermapping, that radically challenges the colonial and imperial divisions of space. Arai undermines the authority of the civilian exclusion order by preventing viewers to discern where the spatial exception of the military starts and ends. At the center of the diptych, Arai incorporates mirrored images of an excised map from the Civilian Exclusion Order number 38 that mapped out where the Army could forcibly remove people of Japanese descent in Arizona. Lieutenant General John L. DeWitt of the Western Defense Command ordered the forced removal of Japanese Americans through a total of 108 civilian exclusion orders. Similarly, in the middle partition of Gila River Print, RI includes an excised ground plan of the Butte, maybe that's, not sure, maybe that's that, of the Butte and Canal Camp in light blue ink. She obscures the ground plan by overlaying an image of a wheat crop in darker brown ink on top. I suggest that RI invokes the density of place and the difficulty of seeing what Manu Karuka calls continental imperialism. RI calls attention to how U.S. empire maintained its power by appropriating indigenous land to establish the Arizona detention centers. Return reveals how U.S. carceral state maintains differentiated control over particular bodies through containment. The partition of vertical white lines between the sections remind viewers that interaction between prisoners and tribal members was strictly policed. This is emphasized by the presence of a soldier in one of the middle partitions. The partition also emphasizes a sense of distance between the two communities by drawing attention to the tribal portraits in the periphery. In the two outermost sections, return invokes the notion of terra nullius, or nobody's land, by situating tribal portraits in less populated sections. This colonial logic equates the indigenous body to land that has yet to be subjugated. In contrast, the center of the innermost section of WRA photographs of detainees suggests evidence of more developed land. RI's composition may reinforce the popular narrative that Japanese Americans were responsible for the agricultural development. However, the juxtaposition also insists on an indigenous presence. In the Gila panel, Return unsettles celebratory narratives of Japanese agricultural success. RI places the portrait of a tribal teacher in relation to a WRA photograph of Momoyo Yamamoto from November 1942. Yamamoto is a farmer, as indicated by her thick sweater, bonnet, and gloves. She smiles, holding up a large radish. RI makes visible how subjects of indigenous nations are situated differently within the U.S. carceral state. Together, the tribal members' portrait and seal serve as visual reminders of native histories that mark indigenous claims to land and how they are also successful farmers. Though not made explicitly visible in the work, almost 7,000 acres of land that was leased to the WRA were already developed by experienced indigenous farmers. The composition of the GRIC teacher's portrait asserts a presence that defies a sense of indebtedness, invoking conventions of honorific portraiture. RI captures the teacher turned away from the camera, his gaze directed toward Japanese American figures. The teacher's ambivalent facial expression does not convey sentiments of gratitude or admiration. Some scholars underscore how the turning away of the body from the camera and spectator gesture to a form of staged collaboration and evidence of self-awareness on the part of the subject. RI's portrait repositions the GRIC tribal member as a figure of authority, whose presence resists the deferred sovereignty of indigenous nations. To speak once more of returns, I will close my talk by revisiting Arai's use of kanji, or Japanese characters, that exemplify her multiple invocations of return. On both panels of the diptych, Arai includes a small vertical black box near the middle of the composition with the text in gold ink that reads, Dedokoro, return. The two kanji may have different meanings when read together, separately, or conjugated with other appropriate characters. For example, as a verb, shushou suru means get out of prison. Within the context of the camps, this could refer to Japanese Americans being released from confinement. This was done through military service, voluntary resettlement, employment beyond the West Coast, the eventual closures of the relocation centers, or death. There's also an implication of discrete temporal of a discrete temporal end that leads to freedom and the ability to leave. How might this term mean something different for Native community members? The reservations are their home, which also functions as a site of detainment and eradication. As a noun, dedokoro means the source, the origin, or where things are from. The camps might be a source of pain and even amnesia for some Japanese Americans. Considering family silences, archival and historical elisions, Returns offers a way for Japanese Americans to revisit the remains of these sites. However, for Native Americans, for Native communities, this word might invoke a completely different interpretation. This term may refer to their ancestral homeland and traditional territories that have been stolen and reconstituted into what Jody Kim calls settler garrison. The settler garrison highlights how U.S. settler colonialism and military empire are linked through the theft of indigenous land and transformed into spaces where the U.S. military can exercise complete authority over space and time. As such, the various configurations of kanji parallel the varied readings of return in Arai's work, and her reclamation of public and private photographs invites us to, first, return to the past, and second, reckon with the unfinished work of racial justice in the U.S. by asking, what about returning land back as a site of memory? Arai's silkscreen print offers a kind of truth, one that reorients our attention to acts of survival in the face of militarized violence. Thank you.